guys, so I am here today bringing you another podcast. It looks like I'm gonna be stuck indoors for a little while, so because everyone's quarantined and we are on lockdown over here. Although that's not what they're calling it, but that's what it is. It's not like being police enforced or anything. It's actually voluntary at this point. They said unless they get a lot of violators, they don't plan on bringing the police into it. So that's a good thing because last thing we need is a situation that looks like the movie Outbreak, and we get lots and lots of police. But I got sent home. My job is an essential job, so technically we could have stayed at work, but I think we had too many people just worried and just scared about this situation. So my boss just did the right thing and he sent everyone home. And now what they're going to do is over the next week or so, we're only quarantined for 2 weeks. So there's only a certain window we can do this. But I keep calling it quarantine, but it's not really quarantine. But anyways, essentially what they're going to do though is they're going to set it up where I can work from home. But until the time being, I have a lot of freedom. I have a lot of time to myself. I'm actually going to go out and film today. And I am decided that I'm going to go ahead and do podcasts. So I'm just going to do a bunch of movies that I love talking to people about that I haven't talked too much about on here. Whether it's newer movies that I've watched or whether it's just older films, I think I'm going to do one on American Wolf in London and Jaws, and maybe touch up on something else I watched, a Creep Show or something. Just last night I decided to watch the new Friday the 13th movie that came out in like 2000 something, 7 or 8. That wasn't very good at all, but I watched it, and I watched Bye Bye Man the other day, which I had not seen and wish I could unsee. But I probably won't do reviews of those because it'll just be me kind of ripping something apart and not really giving it any sort of credence whatsoever. I mean, the new Friday the 13th was about as mindless as the last few films were. None of the... Really, though, if you think about it, none of the Friday the 13th films with Jason have honestly been well made. They've all been really bad. Jason has never gotten a good story. He's never gotten a good... I mean, look, if you're a fan of the Friday the 13th series, don't take this as me saying you shouldn't be, because I love watching those movies too. I'm just saying in terms of like a well-made film, you can always look to the first one and say, oh, that was really well made. Halloween, first one, really well made. The first Nightmare on Elm Street, really well made. The first Friday the 13th, really well made. But if you start cutting into like Jason movies, when Jason gets introduced, it's not until the sequel. And when he's introduced, it kind of becomes the mindless, lots of nudity slasher that it is. And it becomes very mindless. And the stories get real weird. There's a point where he's like fighting a psychic. It just gets odd. It just gets very odd. He always looks a little different. There's never continuity in his look. Things like that. And Michael Myers went through the same thing too. So, and Freddy never did. Freddy kept continuity in his look. Except for New Nightmare, they switched up his look a little bit, but New Nightmare was also like supposed to be breaking the fourth wall. Anyways, but I'm like going way onto a rabbit trail, but that's okay because we're on lockdown. So yeah. So anyways, today my review for you is something that's not even a horror, something that's not rated R, something that doesn't have nudity, something that doesn't have curse words. It's Frozen 2. So before I get into Frozen 2, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Frozen 1. I had heard of Frozen. I had ran into the music video, so to speak, quote unquote, of Let It Go, where you have the character of Elsa, voiced by, I think it's Edina, I think it's how you say her name, Menzel. And it's essentially her, walking up this hill and she's singing this song. And she has great vocals. It's a great song. Um, I decided to go out and go to a Redbox and rent the movie because I'm like, well, I don't always see kids' movies or cartoons because they're cartoons. Unless it's like Toy Story, then I'm right there. Or sometimes I'll just randomly see something and then it might turn out to be good, like Zootopia. But I decided to go ahead and rent Frozen and watch it. And what I found was a film that was completely off from any Disney story ever. Um, it I found a story that was attempting to be kind of female empowering, sort of feminist, by essentially making a story about a woman who is learning to be comfortable with herself and gaining independence from that and saving herself essentially in the end. What I found was a film that had no villain, um, introduced the villain in the third act, which for me was kind of predictable. When I saw it coming, that is, it was predictable, and it wasn't a very good villain. It's just a boyfriend turned bad. So it kind of has all the hallmarks of a feminist film, where it's like you have a woman who's comfortable with herself, becoming independent, and then you have a guy who's the boyfriend who's supposed to be one of the good guys, who turns out to be a bad guy. So it's like all these marks. But then you do have Kristoff and you have Sven, who is becomes Anna's man by the end of the film. And you have just this whole story where Anna's chasing Elsa because she's always looking for her sister's affection and never wanting to really leave her side. And then you have Elsa, who's just trying to figure herself out because she has all these amazing powers that she has no idea how to deal with. And so that's essentially the story. I mean, the beginning of this film is so slow and unbelievably mind-numbing, where you're just sitting there kind of watching things happen, and you don't really get a story until you get to the part where Anna gets struck by ice and she's essentially going to die. And then you get an actual story, but by this time, like, Elsa's like, we're way past second act. Let It Go is like end of the first act at best. And so you don't really get a story until the end of the second act. And then it's just kind of, I'm saving myself, and we shoehorn in a bad guy, and it's just really badly done. Like, I was so surprised to hear that people actually saw this in theaters and loved it. That, and kids are easy to please. Let's be honest. Kids are easy to please. But it baffled me that parents liked it, that people liked it. I was like, this is a bad movie. Really badly written. And I remember there's a clinical psychologist I like listening to named Jordan Peterson. And I remember Jordan Peterson talking about the archetypes that Disney tended to use, which was usually the, sort of the princess in distress, and, the man comes and saves the day. But that's not always the case. I mean, you look all the way back to Little Mermaid, the movie's about Ariel. And it's about her getting what she wants in this boyfriend. And sure, the boyfriend ends up killing Ursula, who's the evil witch, but the movie's centrically focused on a female, and it's just a female getting what she wants in life, which is to fall in love and have a family with this guy, and not allowing the differences to get in the way. It's a pretty strong story arc and storyline. Even Beauty and the Beast is supposed to be like a woman's love being so powerful that it can tame, even the most beastly man. And it does it in a very physical way, where it's like, hey, he legitimately is a beast, and he's legitimately a beast in personality, and she tames him. Rather than like the taming of the shrew, it's the woman who tames the beast of a man. It's the taming of the beast. which could have been another title for the film. There's some negatives in there, like, is it suggesting to women that you stay with a man who is abusive and eventually one day he'll turn into the prince that you want? There's that in there. And I have a friend who deals with social work type stuff, and she's told me she can't tell me how many stories she has where a man has beaten a woman and that woman will fight for him tooth and nail and never get him thrown in jail. And it's crazy, but it happens. It's reversed too. I had a really good friend who was really, in my opinion, was very abused by his girlfriend, and but man, he would not leave her. He just got stuck. So it happens, and it happens both ways. But we do far more commonly hear about the stories of women sticking with men because they feel trapped. Sometimes they feel trapped. Sometimes they feel like one day he'll change. Things like that. So Beauty and the Beast, it makes you wonder, like, is that advocating that? Because it sort of seems like it is. But you gotta kind of like, it's sort of what one of my professors would refer to as an unknown known. It was like, yeah, it did do that, but it was sort of an unknown known. Like, it's not something they were trying to do. It's just something that happened. Something that sort of is in the story. You could just kind of twist the story that way. But Disney tends to do these interesting archetypes all the time. Lion King is sort of the story of the prodigal son. And Aladdin is an interesting story about, like, essentially, being a nothing and being able to be a something just based on being pure good of heart. And that's all it takes. And there's a lot of truth to that. So the films have always had good stories. But then you get Frozen that comes along, and what it's attempting to do is kind of flip the narrative. It's attempting to say, let's focus on the women without them being the damsel in distress. Let them save themselves. Kind of started out with the movie Brave, but the movie Brave kind of shoehorns into this story about the mom. And it becomes more of a relationship type thing and more of a understanding your place in the world. Frozen, it's a little different because it's like she saves herself, and then they choose to shoehorn in essentially the man being terrible and violent and crazy. And it's written by Jennifer Lee. I believe Chris Buck, who also directed it, like Jennifer Lee, wrote the story. Yeah, he was involved with the story as well. But it's funny because every time you see this movie, like, if you look at small synopsises for this movie, they completely address it as Jennifer's film. They do not address it as Chris's film, Chris Buck, for obvious reasons. So this film, Frozen, is, in my opinion, was a disaster. It doesn't teach anything. It tries to teach independence, but it's like there are better ways and easier ways and more coherent stories you could use to do so. Now let's move on to Frozen 2. Frozen 2, again, is a disaster of a film. Even worse than the first. Frozen 2, essentially, there were points in this film where I sat there and thought, is anything going to happen? You're trying to show us a family life with them playing charades. It doesn't work. Then you move on and you have this weird song and you do your famous Let It Go song, but this one is Into the Unknown. Not as strong of a song, but you still have a very powerful vocal behind it, so obviously it works for that reason. But the film essentially turns into a mishmash, a sort of mosaic of things that are happening, where it's like at one point they're in this forest, because the story goes is that, like, essentially years ago, the dad of Elsa and Anna was involved with the war with these nature people, these people of nature who I can't remember their names right now, nor do I care. But they were in tune with nature. They didn't use magic. They just were able to use the magic within nature. And they went to war with the people of Arendelle. And when they went to war with them, essentially the forest shut itself off to everything. and it became icy and cold, and nobody could go into the forest. And if you go into the forest, you're lost forever. You can't make your way out. And so Elsa is getting, this voice is like singing to her and calling her. So she decides to go venture off in, and Anna, being codependent like she is, decides, I'm going to go chase Elsa. And of course, her language doesn't dress up that she's codependent, but her actions do. So she decides to go and chase Elsa. So she goes and chases Elsa, runs into the forest. And when they get in the forest, this thing, I swear it spends at least 15 to 20 minutes of them running in circles. Finding out Arendelle people are still alive. Finding out the nature people are still alive. And then all these like frozen ghosts surrounding them. They look and they go, this one's father. And somehow, some way, look at the girl and they go, and this was one of those, nature girls. Then they walk in a full circle, find out some info, come back, look again, the nature girl's mom. How did you not know the first time? Like, come on. I know kids don't pay attention to stories, but this is just stupidity. Like, this is just dumb writing. Like, what were you thinking? Then you give us these giant rock people, and essentially the story boils down to Elsa, and I'm going to be spoilery, goes into this weird cave, sees a picture of her mom singing, and sees pictures of her past. Then she falls into this other layer, freezes, but not without sending a message to Anna, basically saying, hey, Anna, guess what? Our parents were like, they were no better than these colonizers who essentially killed off the Native Americans and were built a dam so they could get control of these nature people. And then Anna's like, well, let me run and make rock people destroy the dam. It might flood the city, but who cares? Then goes and does it, and it's like, wait a minute here. Are you trying to say that to right the wrong is to destroy this dam and let it flood Arendelle? I mean, I understand you pulled everybody out of there, but where's their livelihood now? Like, what is going on? Like, this is just stupidity. It's almost like, is this what progressives want? Do they think, I mean, it seems that way since they like to back, like, people like Antifa. So it's like, is it about getting as violent as possible in order to right wrongs? Like, that makes no sense to me. And no, that's not the equivalent of, like, punching a Nazi. No, that's just stupidity. That's just dumb. And so I'm already like, this story is just whacked. Then Elsa breaks free, gets on a horse, a magical horse, runs over, freezes the water before it can destroy Arendelle. Oh, so let's rewrite that. So now, so we go ahead and we fix that situation. Okay, we're not going to get violent, because this chick's got super Iceman powers over here, But then it turns out that, like, Elsa is essentially the bridge between nature and the real world. She's the magical bridge between, not the real world, but between nature and man. And that's why she has powers. She's supposed to be the fifth element. The elements are wind, earth, water, fire. Apparently ice is a fifth element. You would think she'd have the ability to control all elements because she's the fifth element or something else. It's not the first time there's the concept of a human being an element or a conscious being an element. I mean, if you've seen the movie called The Fifth Element, that's what it's about. But it's interesting to me that you have this, like, girl who has ice powers. And you wouldn't think she's an element at all because she kind of has the... It's just bad writing. It's bad writing. It's someone not checking the writing. It's someone not thinking. Had the script for Frozen 1 or Frozen 2 passed my hypothetical desk and I had been asked to make it, I would have said no. I would have said no. There's no way I'm doing this. Not without massive rewrites. I'm from my understanding, the original Frozen story was Elsa was a bad guy, and it was a huge reveal at the end that Elsa and Anna were actually sisters. I would have been fine with that. I think that would have been a That sounds like it was going to turn into a better story. Now try to understand, this isn't me bagging on female empowerment. I was fine with Mulan. Mulan was a good film. I was fine with. I'm trying to think of another one that was like really female centric. I mean, like I said, most of their films are female centric. They're very focused on females. Even Tangled is about a woman gaining her independence. You know, not being afraid of the world that's telling her to stay indoors. But it's done the right way. You know, it's okay for a girl to fall in love with a guy. It's okay to have that. You know, Anna, of course, they throw in Anna, Kristoff, and Kristoff because they want you to kind of be like, hey, here's your love story. But our main character, Elsa, she ain't getting no love story. She's independent woman. And but it's done in the most stupidest way possible. Then Kristoff gets this really horrendous song in the film. I mean, a horrendous song that's like, it's done like a weird old 80s video. It's kind of like something you might expect from man, what is that guy's name? I'm trying to think of that musician's name. Oh man, I can't remember his name right now. Phil Collins. It reminded me of Phil Collins, but it's so badly done. I mean, I was laughing when this song's going. I'm laughing at this movie because I'm like, this is just so horrendous. Horrendous. Yes, that deserved repeating. It is a horrendous film. Um, I gave this movie on my letterbox. I gave this movie 2 stars. I gave the first one 2 stars. The only reason they get two, only reason, is because their animation is unbelievable. The animation levels on Frozen and Frozen 2 are just insane. They're so good. At that, I have to give you a point at least for that. But otherwise, you're right close to 1 star because you're so awful. The stories are so awful. You know, just time I wish I could get back because they're so bad. But it is what it is, you know. I mean, kids apparently love this one too. But like I said, you can have Anna and Elsa like stand on screen for like 10 minutes waving at the fans and they would go wild. You know, have them sing a couple of songs and they'd be fine with that. So sometimes kids, you know, are easy in that sense. I think me as a kid, I wouldn't have liked this. I would have been like, yeah, this is kind of weird. Just because the story wasn't really that good. And you had to have at least somewhat of a coherent story for me to like it. And this just didn't have a coherent story at all. I think part of my problem is both Frozen 1 and Frozen 2 could have been done in 30 minutes. Neither one needed to be over an hour. You know, Frozen 1 I think is like an hour 30. This one's like an hour 40. It really didn't need to be. Easily could have been cut down to like a 30-minute short. Because that's how simplistic the stories are. You have too many scenes where the characters are just sort of prancing around doing nothing. Too many scenes where there's nothing to discover. There's nothing for them to do. They are legitimately prancing around doing nothing. Being stupid at best. You know, they find mother and father's ship, and then again, Anna gets all codependent, and Elsa's like, leave me alone, and pushes her off with snow. And then is like, I'm running off, and I'm going to fall in a 3-layer hole and get frozen. Because I control ice, but somehow I still get frozen. And it makes no sense. The whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. It's so bad. Anyways, so, like I said, out of 5 stars, this is like a 2. Out of 10, I'd have to say, it's like a 4.5. It's bad. I would never recommend it. I wouldn't recommend parents show it to their kids. But, you know, parents are going to do what they want to do. And undoubtedly, kids will see this film because they're going to want to see it. I don't understand the popularity. It's nothing like Lion King. Lion King makes sense. There's tons of great archetypes in Lion King. That makes sense why it's so popular. This doesn't. This just doesn't at all. Um, I don't get it. I really don't get Frozen at all. The only thing I could think of is it's the music and the look of it. And kids really like the character of Olaf. I I personally don't really find him funny. I don't really find him entertaining. I don't think he sings very well. But that's also like my view of Josh Gad. Is Josh Gad is just sort of there. I don't really think much of him. I think he's just a person, which he is. But you know what I mean. Like I just think he's just. I could do without you. You know, even in the live action Beauty and the Beast, which the biggest problem with that film was the casting. Josh Gad is just out of place, and but then again, I think every character was. I don't think a single character was casted correctly in that film. So yeah. So anyways, everybody stay safe from the coronavirus. Stay indoors. Try and quarantine yourself. Try and be thoughtful. Um, at the same time, don't allow yourself to freak out or go into the hysterics. And this is coming from somebody who deals with an astronomical amount of anxieties. My anxiety though tends to be like, is anything going to go back to normal? And then I tend to be a hypochondriac where I start thinking I have it, even though I don't have any sicknesses right now whatsoever. Um, but you never know. I could turn up with symptoms tomorrow. At this point, it'd be hard because I'm so indoors all the time. But, if I don't show up on anything anytime soon, then I'm pretty much in the clear because I've been in big crowds. Last time I was in a big crowd was on Thursday, and, then yesterday I was at work with people. But yeah, one of the girls did get sick. She got the flu. It looks like, because she got a really bad fever, but her fever broke after a day. Plus, she doesn't have the respiratory issues. She has kind of like a runny nose, things like that, and those are all more synonymous with a really bad cold, or even more of the average flu, not the COVID-19, not the coronavirus. Coronavirus attacks you respiratorily, if that makes sense. It attacks your lungs, which is why smokers are at high risk. They even did a study recently that showed homosexuals are at high risk. I guess because majority of them smoke. They smoke. They're more likely to smoke than any other group. This was on CDC website. I thought that was interesting. I couldn't think of. I don't really know a lot of people that are homosexual. The only person I can think of at my work, I don't think he smokes. So I think the other one. Oh, actually, no. I know two. One of them does smoke. Huh. Anyways, so I guess it says statistically, though, homosexuals tend to smoke more than the average person. So they have actually found that for whatever reason, coronavirus is attacking them more so than it's attacking. Or doing a lot of damage, I should say, to other people. But if you smoke, if you catch this thing, it is going to tear you a new one. Because it is, there was a lady who posted a video, and a lot of people were saying, this is what the coronavirus does. It's like, no, pay attention to what her words are. She was a smoker. And when you're a smoker, your lungs are already pretty much damaged. So this thing goes after your lungs. So guess what? Yeah, makes things a lot worse for you. So anyways, I don't like telling people what to do, though. If you're a smoker, you're a smoker. That's what you do. But just in this case, just everybody just be safe, be conscious, try and do the right thing. Don't read every little bit of news. Whether it's news that's saying don't freak out because this, and this, because some of those that say that are giving you false facts. Or whether it's saying, listen to this because of this, and this. Some of those are giving you false facts. So I like listening to actual doctors. And everything I've heard from actual doctors is it's worrisome because it spreads really fast. But it's actually manageable, and it's something that, while they do expect the numbers to spike even more so than they already have, eventually it's going to plateau, because we're doing so many precautions, taking so many precautions, and making the right moves, and they are quickly looking for a vaccine or something that can help with this, which is significant as well. I think my only worry, which is partly my paranoia and anxiety, is just whether or not things ever go back to normal. I don't believe the government is going to just step in and say, this is how it is. I think it's hilarious to me, the people who are making this so political. There are people who actually think Trump designed this thing so that he can look like a hero and get a vote, essentially. That makes no sense to me. I mean, 0 cents. It's so weird to me to even claim that. And while at the same exact time, you got Democrats who are using all this stuff to blame Trump. So, I don't know. It's goofy to me, but whatever. People can think what they want. It's a crazy disease that we need to get a control of, and it looks like we are going in the right direction. So, I think everyone just needs to pray that we don't get a lot of deaths, or a lot more deaths than what we've had. And I think people need to pray that that government doesn't take any steps in the wrong direction, after this or using this, and nothing becomes the norm from this. So we got to get our economy back in gear, and that ain't gonna happen until we're allowed to go back to life as normal. All right, so I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for listening to my rant on Frozen 2. All right, bye.